So hi everyone. Thank you for joining another mini episode on the GreenieRE set of webinar and podcasts. Today I'm joined by Jordan Solomon, head of Ecostrat, who'll give a little bit of background on himself and his business in a second. This should last probably about 10 or 15 minutes. I am managing director of InnSure, a nonprofit innovation hub focused at the intersection of climate change, insurance, and innovation. We support something we call GreenieRE, which is a drive to create a nonprofit mission-driven reinsurer with a mission to say yes and provide risk capital backing to as many climate-friendly technologies as possible. So with that, I'll ask Jordan. Do you mind give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity, Chris. I'm Jordan Solomon. I'm the CEO of Ecostrat. I'm the chairman of the BDO Zone initiative. A little bit about Ecostrat. We've been around for about 25 years now. Our head office is in Canada. Our U.S. head office is in Michigan, and we basically have two groups. The first group is Biomass Supply Chain Due Diligence Advisory. So when plants that make biofuels, renewable chemicals, biogas, or bioproducts are looking to raise capital, they need due diligence, credible, independent third party to opine on biomass supply chain risk. That is the risks of getting, say, 1 million tons of wood fiber out of the forest, or biomass agricultural residues out of the fields, or industrial waste out of the factories, and from those sources to the plants. That's a biomass supply chain, and we do more biomass supply chain due diligence work than any other company in North America by far. There might be 20 or 30 projects going on at any one time in the shop. That's one side of the company. Second side of the company, we really made our bones, I guess the hard way. That is, we supply biomass. We supply about 500,000 tons a year of woody biomass, agricultural residues, food waste like fats, oils, and greases from, again, forests, farms, factories, and we put them in trucks, sometimes ships, and we move them from where they're generated to where they're used. Factories that transform them into biofuels, renewable chemicals, and biogas. Again, we've been doing that for a lot of years. We've moved millions of tons of biomass, so we know a little bit about biomass supply chain risk and how to mitigate those risks. Just one other thing, if you let me, Chris. We also led the effort to create a standardized approach for capital markets to understand and quantify biomass supply chain risk. That standardized approach we worked with the U.S. Department of Energy to create those industry standards back about 6 years ago. They became a national standard of Canada in March 2021, and by the end of this year, they're expected to be a binational standard between the CSA of Canada and ASTM for the U.S., which will make them an international standard. So there is a national standard, right, an accepted protocol for evaluating biomass supply chain risk, and we had a big hand in writing that.
That's great. So you talk about that risk. Actually, I'm gonna ask some market questions first. So, how many millions of tons or tons of biomass is moved around either the U.S. or U.S. and Canada, today?
That's a bit of a thorny and controversial question, but there are millions and millions of tons. A typical paper plant, for example, would take in over 1 million tons of wood fiber. Some take in 2 million tons of wood fiber. So, picture one pulp and paper plant, and imagine a big sucking sound for 100 miles in any direction, and that's 1 million or 2 million green tons of woody biomass going in. And the pellet industry is utilizing wood fiber and et cetera, but there's never been a quantification of how much biomass is used today. However, the U.S. Department of Energy did come out with a very well-known billion-ton study. One of their labs, Oak Ridge National Labs, is the brains behind the billion-ton study, which confirmed that their belief that there is over 1 billion tons of additional sustainably available biomass resources available in the U.S. alone.
So you've mentioned risk a number of times in the conversation so far, the supply chain risk. How big is that risk for a project, and who's bearing that risk today?
That's a very interesting question. Let me start with answering it this way. Most people don't know this. If you were to fly in a jet out of LaGuardia or LAX or Chicago O'Hare, any of the big airports in the United States today, most people are not aware that 3% of the fuel that's firing that jet is actually sustainable aviation fuel. It's made from wood. And it's identical molecule for molecule with fossil-based jet. That means the jet engine in the American Airlines jet that you're flying can't tell the difference between jet fuel made from wood or corn stover or food waste or manure and jet fuel that comes out of the ground.
Wow.
And the airlines have made a commitment that they want to be 100% SAF in the next couple of decades. So the question is, how do we obtain that, and what role does biomass feedstock risk play in preventing achievement of that goal? The answer is very, very significant. In order to meet that goal, we need to scale. It's almost impossible to imagine the degree to which this SAF production industry needs to scale in the next 10 years. But just imagine this. Imagine an Olympic-sized pool. That's the amount of jet fuel that would take to completely 100% go SAF-based jet. Size of all the water in an Olympic-sized pool.
Okay.
How much is produced today? 1 cupful. 1 cupful. And we need to ramp up an industry to produce every year an Olympic-sized pool. So this is a very big ask. And unfortunately, we don't have the insurance instruments or other financial tools to help the industry yet scale to the degree that it's necessary. What are the risks? USA Bioenergy is a SAF company, a sustainable aviation fuel company, that's currently looking to raise $2 billion to build a plant in Bonwire, Texas, to make sustainable aviation fuel, jet fuel, out of wood. They need roughly 2 million green tons of wood a year to make into jet fuel. Citibank's going out to the street to do a $2 billion raise to make that happen. What are the questions that the street's going to ask USA Biofuel? Well, one of the questions they ask is, USA Biofuel, can you get that wood, that 2 million tons of wood fiber a year that you need? And can you get it at the price you need it to consistently be profitable enough to service $2 billion of debt? That's a big question. And to the degree that USA Bioenergy is able to answer that question with a solid yes, then Citi's going to be able to raise that $2 billion easier, faster, and less expensively. In fact, the difference between security of biomass supply and non-security of biomass supply, that 2 million tons, can be more than 200 basis points of debt. And so imagine getting $2 billion of debt for this project, and instead of paying 9% or 8%, the project pays 6%.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference between these projects getting built and these projects not getting built, between these projects being profitable and these projects not being profitable enough. And so that brings us to the major problem, and eventually to the role of insurance, potentially, in mitigating these risks. The problem, one of the key problems of getting 1 million tons of biomass out of the forest, for example, and into a factory to make it into a biofuel or a renewable chemical, for example, is the fact that biomass suppliers tend to be small, medium sized, but they're almost never investment grade. So from the point of view of the capital markets, there's no throat to choke if the supply chain breaks down. There's no one to sue. Sue these guys, they go bankrupt, right? They're all small, medium-sized foresters or sawmills and so balance sheet financing for bio-based development is not possible because the supply chains are made up of 70, 80, 100 different, they're all Tom, Dick, and Harry's. They're small, medium-sized, non-investment grade suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it's very difficult to raise capital inexpensively and rapidly because of the nature of the supply chains, the non-investment grade nature. So you're going to want to ask me your next question about what's the role of insurance.
Absolutely. No, this is great. I love that.
It's a natural segue. So look, there's a natural role for insurance to play in helping to securitize, as it were, or make bankable, in other words, these non-investment grade supply chains. And so what's the role of insurance in catalyzing rapid growth of biofuels, renewable chemicals, and biogas around the world? And the role of insurance, there's many roles for insurance, but one of the key roles of insurance is to de-risk, to wear the risk of these hairy, non-investment grade biomass supply chains. And functionally, what that means is, remember, feedstock cost, the cost of getting 1 million tons out of the forest, 1 million tons of wood out of the forest and giving it to a SAF plant, that's their largest variable cost by a mile, right? That's their raw material cost is wood. And so if insurance was able to somehow cap that insurance cost, wear the risk of insurance cost at a price above which that project could no longer service a material financial covenant, like a debt repayment cost, then what you'd have is an investment grade supply chain. And what that would, the result of that would be catalytic across, well, the world, in fact, because instead of getting capital at, and I'm making this up, 8 percentage points, they get it at 6 percentage points. Instead of taking a year to round up equity and debt and sub-debt, it would take less time to do that. All because right now we're pushing the risk onto the parties that are ill-suited to wear that risk. Small non-investment grade suppliers. And because they can't wear it, you know who has to wear it? Equity needs to wear it, right? That's not good. Equity costs 15, 16, 20%. So you have these these disproportionate equity to debt ratios because we're pushing the risk onto the wrong party. And that's the role of insurance. Insurance is the right party to offload biomass feedstock risk. And that kind of insurance product, again, would absolutely catalyze, accelerate, and de-risk by de-risking biofuels development, renewable chemicals development, biogas development, and bioproduct development around the world. Insurance is absolutely essential to reaching the road to achieving the goal, the decarbonization goals that so many countries have around the world, including the United States.
This is fantastic. So thank you for sharing that also so clearly for our listeners. So in terms of capacity or capital, where do you see the biggest hurdle? And you may not know, honestly. Like, is it the creation of the product or finding the insurance capital to back that creation, right? You'll probably need both to turn, what is and I'm not necessarily speaking specifically about Ecostrat, but an advisory data gathering function into an insurance product and then a capitalized insurance product. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts actually. I would say that the biggest hurdle is mathematics, or more accurately, predictive analytics, right? An underwriter needs to, in order to wear that feedstock risk, they need to understand the quanta of that risk. And so what becomes very important is to be able to predict the future cost of biomass feedstocks. What's the likelihood over the next 10 years that 1 million tons of wood fiber that's coming out of the forest in Texas and going to USA Bioenergy is going to exceed the price that sinks USA Bioenergy's pro forma? That's the price that insurance needs to insure. That's the car accident that needs to be insured, right? And so when I say that mathematics is the key, these are very, very complicated supply chains, and there needs to be, very elegant, stochastic predictions of feedstock availability and price risk. And not only that, but those mathematics need to be hung around a framework that's universally accepted and credible. That framework is the standards for biomass supply chain risk. I believe our company does some of the most elegant and accurate math in the world to predict biomass supply chain risks. But the reason that our math is accurate, and we can backtest it to show that it is, and the reason it's credible is it's not a black box, right? The mathematics, the predictive analytics are hung around a framework that's a national standard framework that's been widely accepted by governments, by capital markets, by other stakeholders in the industry. So in developing that if an underwriter is going to secure capacity to mitigate biomass supply chain risk, they can't do that unless they accurately understand the risk that we're asking them to wear. You can't do that unless you have the right math. So step one's the right math. You have the right math, anyone can go out and find some, not anyone, it's not easy, but lots of parties can go out and bring capacity that's willing to wear that risk.
Fair. This was great. Any other sort of final comments or thoughts you have either on the industry, the capital space, biomass you want to share with the folks?
I would just say that there's so much capital needed, trillions of dollars of capital ready to be deployed into the clean energy transition and in bioenergy in particular. So the capital's there, and the capital's willing, but it's capital, right? It's not willing to deploy at any risk level. So to the degree that insurance is able to practically de-risk capital, there's trillions of dollars of capital that's actually able to be unlocked with the right switch. And there's only one right switch, and it's insurance.
This was great. Jordan, thank you so much for joining. Look forward to chatting again soon.
Thank you.